All right, shall I get started in a few minutes? You'll signal me?
There's a few more coming.
What, your countdown?
There's a few more coming.
Okay. Sorry. There'll be a few more coming? All right. I'll start here, okay? You give me a countdown? Or what?
No, go ahead.
Oh, just start anytime I want? Okay. Well, there are two more coming. Let them sit down first. All right, I'll get started soon. Good evening. Welcome. All right. All right, I'll start. Well, good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to this session on meditation, mind, and spirituality. Tonight, we'll start with this aspect. All right, the Bible, and the aspect of neuroscience, of love, hope, and optimism. And the reason I'm starting here is because when I started to research what Eastern meditation does to the brain and to the mind, I had to look at the science of it. And I discovered how wonderfully we are made. Our brain, our mind, where in the brain does love, hope, and optimism reside? That when these parts are activated, we actually feel love and hope and optimism and our will. Right? So, and Eastern meditation activates some of these parts and deactivates others, causing us to have, well, neural phenomena. And some of them are detrimental. So I'm going to show you the positive side of brain science. Now, that's my name, Kok Tho Yip. I was an ex-Zen meditator. I did Zen meditation for 20 years, from 18 to 38. And at 38, I became Christian. But what happened was, about 7 or 8 years ago, I began to notice that Eastern meditation was coming into Christendom. And having done it, and having come out of it, I was shocked that it could actually come in. So I began to research it. And what I found, my major concern is, Eastern meditation is hybridized with Christianity and widely practiced in Christendom as mindfulness in mental health, secular society, including education and school systems. The US courts have ruled that mindfulness, which is derived from Eastern meditation, is not religious. And because it is not religious, it can come into schools and it can come into medical systems. And then the other thing I found out was this, and I'm going to this place to bring you to understand how this works. Eastern spiritual worldviews and beliefs are imparted experientially through neural phenomena occurring directly in the brain and not through words. In other words, I could try teaching you the worldview of the East through Eastern through the beliefs of Eastern meditation, but you wouldn't understand it. No one could understand until they do the practice of Eastern meditation. And then things happen in the brain. And then they say, oh, now I understand the words and the beliefs and the concepts. So what happens is something happens in the brain that generates within your own brain that Eastern worldview, that pantheistic worldview. And it is only the words that follow that describes what you felt. So by eliminating the doctrine, the beliefs, by eliminating the words, doesn't make mindfulness not religious, because it is generated within the person's own brain, that worldview. Right? And science shows how that it happens and how it happens. All right, so we'll talk about the positive side about the brain so that you understand what is being manipulated. Dr. Beauregard, Montreal University, was looking at where in the brain does romantic love occur. So they now can see the brain as it works, as it fires, and they put one of two persons who are romantically linked, right, in the MRI machine, and shows that person the one they love, romantically love. And the brain fires up in 3 places. And one of them is called the anterior cingulate cortex. And I'm calling it ACC for short. It fires up, one of 3 places. That's romantic love. But he got curious. What about unconditional love? So as a scientist, he fashioned the experiment as a carer or carers caring for someone who's sick, who is poor, who's destitute, and can never repay back. So it's unconditional. So again, the same experiment, showing the carer the picture of the one they care for unconditionally. And 7 places of the brain lighted up. 7. And so the more places in your brain that lights up, the better you feel, all right? It lighted up like a Christmas tree. And one of the places was the ACC. So the scientists say that the ACC plays a significant role in mediating cognitive influences on emotion. Right? But these are very technical, cold scientific terms. Now, here's a psychiatrist expressing that in more human language, right? A special part of the frontal cortex called the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, is our neurological heart. It is here we experience love, compassion, empathy, sympathy, altruism. And the ACC is also the seat of the will, the place we choose right from wrong. So the ACC is crucial to our, being human, and particularly for Christians, is love, your will, right from wrong. You cannot risk the ACC going down or being deactivated even for a moment. It's there to guide you, to protect you even, right? All right. So other scientists and researchers found the ACC was also responsible for hope and optimism. Now, what happens when we get depressed or anxious? It's something in the back, in the limbic system, called the amygdala. So if your boss should push you week after week, wants results, no help offered, the amygdala gets active. And then you get into anxiety and depression. Now, what the scientists found out was when the ACC is activated, the depression goes away. Okay? So the question is really, how do we activate the ACC? Well, there's romantic love, there's unconditional love, right? But there are other methods. So the point really is the ACC is valuable to us for hope and optimism. It controls the emotion, and it calms the amygdala. All right? Now, what we found out is that unconditional love activates the ACC, and depression or anxiety is when the amygdala is activated. So, if I was stressed, my amygdala is activated, and that's my stress. But however, if my ACC is activated, it suppresses my amygdala. Hope and optimism. This is the picture of hope and optimism. This is the picture of anxiety and depression. Okay? Now, I'll show you the data in just a moment. When one meditates Eastern style, the amygdala is calm. The ACC is suppressed. Okay? So one feels peace, bliss, and tranquility, but not hope and optimism. You follow? So bliss and tranquility, but not hope and optimism. However, if you did biblical meditation, your ACC is activated, and it suppresses the amygdala at the same time. So this is ACC activated, amygdala suppressed, and it's hope and optimism. All right, so there are two results of meditation, biblical and Eastern, okay? And I'll show you the data. And the scientists say what fires together, wires together. In other words, you have neural networks, and say you chose to learn French. And as you learn French, that neural network for language grows from thin to thick. And if you stop using that language, it goes from thick to thin. So the scientists say, what fires together? Wires together. Okay? And the same applies to our love network, our optimism network. All right? So we can shape our brains for anxiety or hope and optimism. And we can strengthen that network. That's the key. So having understood those things, we will now go into making a difference, differentiating between biblical meditation and Eastern meditation, their derivatives, which are Christian hybrids, and mindfulness. Now, Eastern meditation offers methods of emptying the mind, of silence and nothingness. All right? They call it non-judgment and bare awareness. And the methods of arriving at these situations are many. For example, when I was doing Zen, I was asked to sit cross-legged, relaxedly, and to follow my breath in cycles of 10, very slowly as I breathe. Right? So to follow one's breath in cycles of 10, to feel and to think of breath is to think of nothing, because breath is nothing. So by following that, one empties one's mind. Now, the other method they taught me was to dwell upon a riddle. And the riddle was, what is the sound of one hand clapping? What's the sound? Anything? Nothing. So these methods are to empty the mind, right? To go into something called a silence, right? Now, if I were to ask you to focus on this spot of light and to do it for minutes, like an extended minutes, perhaps half an hour, in order to think of nothing, to focus on this spot to the exclusion of everything, are you focused or not focused? You're focused on something very small. But the whole purpose is to exclude everything else. Right? So it's nothingness. Right? So the whole purpose of these things is to think of nothing, to empty yourself. Now, so the question is, how can these silence and nothingness be dangerous? That's where we're going with this talk. Now, writers of Buddha Pill had said this: you can choose a mantra that can be Christian, like Maranatha, or Sanskrit, like Om, or you can choose Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. And the same things happen in your brain. So by choosing a Christian mantra and doing breathing, right, which is neutral, it's not religious, the same thing happens in your brain. So by choosing any mantra doesn't make it Christian or Buddhist or Hindu. Okay? So it works just as well with Coca-Cola. Now, one of the first things that happen when you start meditating is your brain gets more sleep waves, pre-sleep and deep sleep waves, more of it. Now, hopefully now, as you listen to me, you're in fast wave beta. So you're assessing what I'm trying to tell you. You're wondering if it's true. You're bringing in information that you've heard before. But as soon as you begin to meditate, you get more alpha waves, pre-sleep, and your mind drifts as you fall off to sleep. And then in deep sleep, you get theta. You get more of these waves in your brain. And what do scientists then tell you about these things, right? This is Brown's University. They say when alpha, which is pre-sleep, oscillations, waves, are prominent, your sensory inputs tend to be minimized. Neuroscientists at Brown's University are doing research on how the brain achieves optimal inattention. They want, they're looking at mindfulness. The mindfulness is to optimize your inattention. And they say, the Brown researchers hope that teaching people how to harness the power to ignore by creating alpha brain state through mindfulness. So what it gives people the benefit of, they say, is the power to ignore and to optimize inattention. So this is the power to ignore our problems, to be inattentive to our problems. And here I make a joke so that you will remember it. If you should have a great big disagreement, perhaps a quarrel even with your mother-in-law, and both of you meditated, your problems will be gone. You don't have to deal with your problems. All right. The amygdala. In meditation, the amygdala calms down, and that's true. Now, what happened is the researchers showed meditators, after 8 weeks of meditation and 3 weeks rest, they showed them 216 images. Some were delightful, some were neutral, some were frightening. They showed these pictures to them before they meditated and after they meditated, after a rest of 3 weeks. What they found was the delightful pictures after meditation are not as delightful as before. And the frightening pictures are not as frightening as before. So the amygdala has calmed down. They're sedated. Now, if you should be stressed and you did meditation, yes, you regain a certain amount of composure. Now, after regaining your composure, if you should say to yourself, I'll do more of it to give my life a lift. It doesn't happen because you are sedated. You're overcalmed. Right? So for normal people, it's not good. It doesn't work. Now, as a psychiatrist, David Brendel, some people use mindfulness strategies to avoid critical thinking. Now, why is it successful in avoiding critical thinking? Because of the alpha and theta waves, right? The power to ignore, inattention. I've worked with clients who, instead of rationally thinking through a career challenge or ethical dilemma, prefer to disconnect from their challenges and retreat into a meditative mindset. The power to ignore, a calmed amygdala, bliss. And then there is endogenous dopamine. You get 65% more of endogenous dopamine. And dopamine is the stuff of addiction. And that's why meditators are ushered by dopamine to do more and more meditation. Okay, so there's addiction. And there's a decreased desire for action. And a heightened sense of imagery. Dopamine apparently causes you to see things more vividly than others. And there are reports that people have been able to see music as lights. Now, the default mode network. Scientists describe this as that parts of the brain where people who are depressed, who are negative about themselves, ruminate about their problems. So it's negative for them, right? I'm no good, people don't love me, I deserve to be just treated this way, and so forth. And so one of the benefits of meditation is the default mode network quietens down, so the rumination stops. And so that's what they're going for. But scientists also say, psychologists also say, that if you had thoughts and you wrote them in a piece of paper, good or bad, you crushed that piece of paper and threw it in a bin. Right? They are discarded. That thoughts are discarded. So the risk of people discarding good thoughts by stopping their DMN is also there. You can discard your bad thoughts, but you can also discard your happy thoughts. All right? Now, most of all, the ACC. We described the ACC initially. Hope and optimism, love, altruism, right from wrong, the will. All right? Scientists are showing that in meditation, now that is the zero line, right? In the ACC, in meditation, M is deactivated. All right? For the controls, it's activated. So it's deactivated in meditation. Now, can we risk having our ACC deactivated? No. And in relation to hypnotism, I'll show you later, the ACC needs to be deactivated. In other words, Eastern meditation deactivates the ACC for the purpose of hypnotism. In a while, in the next few slides. So here it is again, more elaborate of that data. Meditators in meditation, the ACC is down. Meditators in activity, the ACC is up. It gets back up to normal in normal life. Okay? But in meditation, it is in meditation when hypnosis happens. And that's when it happens. That's the crucial thing. Okay? Not that it never goes back up. It does. But a suggestion comes through, a spiritual suggestion comes through. A completely new worldview comes through at that point of meditation. Now, there's decreased blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. And this happens in yoga nidra, where people feel very relaxed when there's decreased blood flow in the brain. But it's very similar to food coma, when blood goes to your stomach and you are very relaxed. Now, Jordan Grafman, he's a neuroscientist, director of brain injury research, Chicago. He says this: the frontal lobes are the most evolved areas of the human brain and help control and make sense of the perceptual input we get from the world. Further investigation revealed that damage to a specific area of the brain, known as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, was linked to markedly increased mysticism. When the frontal lobe's inhibitory functions are suppressed, a door of perception can open, increasing the chances of mystical experiences. So, the frontal lobe, if it's taken offline, damaged, or if in meditation it's taken offline, as if it is damaged, to deactivate it, you get the same risk of mystical experiences. So there's Gilbert Taylor. She had a massive stroke. And as she lost control, she said her body felt like as if it had disintegrated into a million pieces and it was blending into the wall. So she had a mystical experience in the midst of her stroke. And she was interviewed, and she said this: the me and we in our brains. In other words, she was not herself. She was everybody else. She became one with everything and everybody. That's her mystical experience. Now, the most common phrase, as you Google it, during meditation, the frontal cortex tends to go offline. In other words, you've got your mobile, you put it in airplane mode, you've taken it offline. So the frontal lobe is taken offline, deactivated, particularly the ACC. All right? Now, Andrew Newberg, he's one of the top researchers in this field, and what he said was, meditation-based practices affect beliefs and experiences through a frontal and a parietal network. So there are two parts of the brain, the front, and another part called the parietal. And this is what meditation-based practice affects. So here he describes a lot of words, but here's how he describes it. As you meditate, as the front gets starved of information, the parietal goes down. Now, what is the parietal? The parietal is what tells you where you are in three-dimensional space. It's the part of the brain that gives you your orientation. For example, this gentleman, he knows he's about 10 feet from me, or maybe 40 feet from the ceiling. He's got a sense of his body shape, where he's sitting. If there's a fire, he will know where he's oriented. He knows that's the exit. But when the parietal goes down, you lose your position. You lose your body shape, a sense of body shape, and where you are. You feel as if you're one with everything, and everything is one with you. And that's, I think, what happened to Jill Bolte Taylor. Right? The me and we in one. So the parietal goes down, and you've got this feeling that you're one with the universe. Now, this is the point at which I believe people say, oh, that's nirvana. Hindus. Right? Buddhists may call it liberation. Now, Christian, doing the same thing, arriving at the same place, will call it, oh, I'm now in the presence of God. And that comes through as a suggestion, because the ACC is down. Right? The ACC is the will. Right? When the will is down, a suggestion can come through. That's the risk. So is it possible for one kind of neural phenomena to be acclaimed by so many religions as the high point of their meditative practices? No. Right? There are different theologies, different belief systems, but one common neural phenomena, giving them the opportunity to claim what they want to claim. Now, this is the icon of meditation. As you begin meditation, you're whole. You are a drop of water, whole and yourself. But as your parietal goes down, you blend with the cosmic ocean, and you lose your individual identity, and you become one with the universe. This is the icon of meditation. Now, Columbia University tells you how people what the brain looks like, what happens in the brain when they are successfully hypnotized. And they say there are two places in the brain, the ACC, and it's responsible for the will, right and wrong. And then there's the frontal cortex, the LFC, awareness of reality. These two places are working all the time, right? What is real? If it's unreal, it's a false suggestion, it's a lie, your will rejects it. So it's there to protect you, to guide you. But in where they have successfully hypnotized someone, these two places are decoupled. They're not working with each other. Right? Now, in Eastern meditation, the ACC goes down. We saw that in the scientific research. So when the ACC goes down, it's decoupled. It's decoupled from reality. So Columbia University says when they are decoupled, you are already in a post-hypnotic state. They have successfully hypnotized someone, and they are decoupled. So if I was Hindu, and I grew up Hindu, and I believed that there's something called nirvana. And one day as I'm grown up, I decided to go and meditate with my guru. Now, all around me, as I grew up, I already believed in nirvana. I'm going into meditation to discover it. So when my parietal goes down, and my ACC goes down, when my parietal goes down, I got this dramatic feeling of being one with everything. And my ACC goes down. So when my ACC goes down, I am open to suggestion. And the suggestion need not even come from the guru, this is nirvana. Because as I grew up, I lived believing there's nirvana. So when there's this dramatic feeling, when the parietal goes down, the suggestion automatically comes into my mind. This is nirvana. So I accept it. So it becomes a reality. and experiential reality. Now, the same thing happens in Buddhism. And now, because Christendom is using these methods, perhaps they're using a Christian mantra like Maranatha, but doing breath, the same thing happens. And the suggestion is, now you're in the presence of God. Now, can you be hypnotized into believing? Right? That's the question. Now, we know that God deals with us when our will and our reality are up, not down. Right? He wants us to believe that He is supreme in love, that we go through this perhaps even cathartic sense of that we are a sinner before the supreme God of love. And because of His love, we are humbled to know who we are. Now that is not only complex, that is heart-wrenching. Right? And that is, you're torn in emotion. You're torn between being loved and being a sinner. Now, it's too complex to say, to hypnotize someone to believe, to feel that. So you can hypnotize someone to say, oh, stop smoking. All right? You can hypnotize someone to say, oh, this is God. But you can't hypnotize someone into a complex human sense of the greatness of God and His love for you. So for that true experience, your will must be up and your reality must be up. Who God is in real terms and who you are before God in real terms. So Ellen White said this: he, therefore, Satan, transformed himself into an angel of light and works upon the mind to allure from the only safe and rightful path. The science of phrenology, psychology, and mesmerism, which was the old word for hypnotism, are the channel through which he comes more directly to this generation and works with that power which is to characterize his efforts near the close of probation. The word characterize means this is the type of work Satan chooses to use at the end of time. And the scientists say sometimes meditation results in profound changes in consciousness, leading individuals into trance-type states, states of self-hypnosis, and mystical states. Now, James Braid, 1840, founder of hypnotism, he wrote a book, and he thought at that time that you need someone else to hypnotize another. But his friends who were reading the book and was in Turkey and Persia and India said, James, no, these folks in these foreign eastern lands are hypnotizing themselves. And James had a look, and then he admitted, there is no need for an exoteric influence. There's no need for an external influence. They can hypnotize themselves. So, meditation and mindfulness, the induction to hypnotism is starving the brain of information, silence and emptiness. The amygdala is calm. You feel very good. Sleep waves, you feel tranquil. Endogenous dopamine, you're addicted, and you do more and more of this, and there's blood flow away from the brain in Yoga Nidra. The frontal lobe is taken offline. The ACC is deactivated. The parietal is deactivated. And this is when you're at the deep end. And you've got this dramatic feeling, and the suggestion comes true. The false suggestion comes true. So, Andrew Newberg said, we think this is part of what is associated with somebody losing the sense of self. They feel at one with God, at one with their spiritual mantra, whatever it is they are looking at. So here is that icon again of meditation. And the East, when that happens, when that oneness happens, they have names like Advaita, Nirvana, Satori, oneness, liberation, enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, universal consciousness. And on the panentheism, where this is where God is basically an essence, energy. Here is where God is a person, panentheism. God, the person, here is oneness with God, in the presence of God, himself, the person. And this is called non-dual in the East, where two, man, evil as he may be, unbelieving as he may be, in meditation becomes one with God. Not two, but one, non-dual. And here is the similar suggestion for that in Christian meditation, hybridized with the East, that you achieve oneness with God in meditation. Right? Now, is it possible that following a process that one can find God in a process, in a method? No? That would be twisting the arm of God. Right? So, it is when our hearts are open to God, through the reading of the Word, through prayer, through biblical meditation, when He draws us with the depth of His words. That is conversion. Now, so, the big thing now is this. This kind of arrival to thinking that you believe in God is not conversion. It's discovery. It is based on the immortal soul. The East is based on the immortal soul. Definitely. In other words, we're all born with an immortal soul. So meditation is to push away all distractions that we may discover the immortal soul. It's not conversion. It's not discovering God from outside. It is discovering something, the immortal soul, or the inner divinity as they call it, that's vested already from birth. So it's a discovery process, and that's dangerous. So now, mindfulness goal is it's non-judgmental. Why is it non-judgmental? Because the ACC is down. Right? It is what it is. However, whatever you feel, however you think at that time, is no right, no wrong. It's bare attention, it's pure awareness. And this quote here, I will reserve until a few slides later. Now, I was doing this, and that was how I viewed life, spiritually even. But I want to describe Psalms 19, okay? Psalms 19 is when King David was meditating. Verse 14 says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer." That's verse 14. So in verse 1 to 13, he was meditating. So I just go through his meditation and to bring out what was the outcome of biblical meditation. Now remember, Eastern meditation says, I discover something divine within in the process of meditation that was already there. All right? God already within man. All right? That's where they are. Psalms 19. King David was meditating on the heavens, the stars, the sun, and then he personified the sun as a bridegroom, as a strong man coming, a bridegroom coming to run a race. Now, if we conceptualize the sun as a bridegroom, we would therefore expect a wedding. And he began to meditate and said, on the statutes and judgment and the law, and said, these are very good. It gives warning and reward, he said. And they are like fine gold and honey. And then he said, Lord, show me my secret faults. Now, what are secret faults? Secret faults are what our deceitful heart will even hide from ourselves. But the Lord knows. And so he said, Lord, I trust you. I open my heart to you. I become transparent. I need you to show me my secret faults. And then he said, reveal to me also my presumptuous sins. that I may be innocent from the great transgression. And then he went into that verse. So here's a man meditating, biblical style, and his conclusion, in expectation of a wedding, a love wedding. He wanted to know about himself that he may be innocent for the wedding. God, you know my heart, and only you can reveal to me what I need to know about myself, that I may be real before you. So here is an outcome of biblical meditation, where the man is now in trust and in love, connected to God. God who is outside of him, right? My strength and my redeemer from the outside. But the East says, I've got God within, an inner divine. And for this application for the Christian, the immortal soul. So I meditate to discover something that I already have. And that's why Ellen White said, if in pantheism, the risk is that people will not need Christ. So this is the big difference. So I was doing this, and I found this to my great delight by coming to church and listening to a sermon for 3 days. And that was my point of conversion, a realization how wrong I was. So now what about mindfulness? Mindfulness, well, we'll see, all right? John Kabat-Zinn, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, in his own words, for a number of years in the late 70s, Larry Rosenberg and I taught back-to-back evening classes in a church, Harvard Square. He would teach Vipassana and meditation, a Buddhist practice of mindfulness, and I followed with mindful Hatha Yoga. He was a teacher. And Wikipedia talks about Kabat-Zinn was a student of Buddhist teachers, of Zen masters such as Thich Nhat Hanh, famous Zen masters, and Master Sung San. He was a founder member of Cambridge Zen Center. His practice of yoga and studies with Buddhist teachers led him to integrate their teachings with those of science. So he blended them. Now, Zen, which I did, the ultimate goal of Zen is something called Satori. Now, what is Satori? Transcendence of everyday cognition to achieve a direct experience of reality in its totality. Reality is total, unitive. Man and everything else is one. Okay, that's reality. That's where they're going. Right. Now, what is against that experience? And they're saying the thing that's against that experience is our logical analysis and rationality. You're too rational, too logical. That's why you can't feel this totality. Okay? And therefore, we must suppress it. We must dissolve these artificial structures. What artificial structures? Logic and rationality. And where does logic and rationality reside? In the frontal lobe. Right? ACC, reality. Lateral frontal cortex, reality. So we must dissolve that. We must suppress that. Right? These artificial structures are corrupting intermediary. They are obstacles to your oneness. So, but if you should meditate, Zen style, and succeed, and get to Satori, and it will unfold a new world, hitherto unperceived, in the confusion of a dualistic trained mind. Our mind are rational and too rational. Are rational and logic, sorry. And because we're trained this way, there's duality. You, I'm me, and you are you, and we are very different. There's a gulf between us and the audience. But if my mind could get to Satori, we are all one. This is what they're selling. Right? And this oneness is God. Okay? This oneness, when everything is God, energy is God, essence is God. And in Hatha Yoga, which John Kabat-Zinn did, the ultimate is samadhi. Okay? What is samadhi? In the red, 3 aspects of meditation. The meditator, the act of meditation, the object of meditation, known as God, are finally united as one. Discovery of something already there. All right? That's where the difference is. Okay? That unity was already there. Samadhi is discovering something that's already there. It's discovery. Now, what is samadhi? In Hatha Yoga, there are 8 limbs to get to samadhi, or 8 limbs to form samadhi. Now, a limb is not a step. Your body, your hand is not a step, it's a limb. That your person may be full, whole. That's samadhi, right? So samadhi is the wholeness of 8 limbs. All right? The few limbs are ethical behavior, spiritual practice, physical poses, breath control, turning the senses from the outside influence in awareness, these practices, concentration. And then the 7th limb is meditation, and the 8th is samadhi. Now imagine this hand of mine. 5 fingers and a palm are limbs. They need each other to be a palm, to be a hand. Right? So if the practice of posture, ethics, breath, awareness are all part of the process for the person to consolidate the person into oneness with God, or God himself. It's a concentration, consolidation process. So when people say, oh, I'm only doing posture. No, you're not. You're doing a limb of samadhi. All right? I'm being more aware. No, you are now consolidating 2 things of the body of samadhi. All right? So this is what they're doing. You cannot isolate it. This is what it is. Now, so the East knows that all this stuff, this meditative stuff, is sensory phenomena to launch you into divinity. That's what it is in the East. But here in the West, it's gone into New York, yoga studios with mirrors everywhere. And it's a completely different package, all right? Now, John Kabat-Zinn. This is a quote from him in Mindfulness for Beginners, 2006. He said, the goal is there's no place to go, nothing to attain. It's realizing you are already here, so there's no place else to go. What happens now is what matters. The future we want is here now. We're already in it. Now, this is secular language, true. There's no religious language there. But it's mystical. Right? For me, I recognize this as a combination of samadhi and satori. Because can you imagine you coming to a place where you feel that you've arrived? Like a time machine? There's no place to go, there's no time, things stand still, it's like eternity. Right? This is the goal of mindfulness. So, mindfulness goal is non-judgmental. You're in this fluid world of oneness. It is what it is. There's no right, no wrong. It's bare attention. It's pure awareness. The future we want is here now. We're already in it. There's this famous quote of the Dalai Lama, a meditator. What is love? Love is the absence of judgment. Now, is this true for us? Is love the absence of judgment? Our message is, fear God, for this is the hour of his judgment. And this is the God of love. Right? So, I want to exaggerate this so that you can understand why they say this and why this is such a high point in their life. What it means is this. In love, there's no judgment. In other words, the people on this side, if you were country A and this is country B, and you're at war with each other. And here I come, and I spy for you against them in the first month. In the second month, I spy for you against them. In love, there's no judgment. In other words, I do not judge between you. I do not differentiate between you. Do I love you more than them? Or do I love you more than them? In fact, I couldn't care less. I can't care. I do not make no difference to me what happens to you. That's not love. But this is how they sell it. And they sell it as an experience, meditative experience. Right? And this is Maralapa, the most famous of all meditators of old. He would meditate for weeks and months, and he needed to be bathed and fed. And if you had stress, and you went to him and said, Maralapa, help me, he said all he can do is to invite you to meditate with him, and you will have to be fed and bathed. That is what meditation. It is an escape from being of service to the world. Okay? Now, I want to get to this. So it's neural transmission. Many things happen in the brain that brings you to that state. Now, what happens now if I were to teach you, to try to use words to teach you to arrive at Satori or Samadhi? And I said this, and this is how they teach it in Zen. All of us here are waves in the sea. All right? You're a wave, I'm a wave. All of us are waves. And waves are seawater. And seawater is God. And so we are all one. We are all God. Now, you'd say to me, Kok Tho is talking rubbish. How can that be true? But what the scientists say and what the meditators say, but if you meditate, what is incomprehensible becomes comprehended. Something happens in the brain when you meditate. And this is experienced. Now, and this is what they say, this is what they claim, and it's true. So things happen in the brain. Now, the US courts say, mindfulness is not religious because it doesn't use religious language. But mindfulness uses Eastern methods. Something happens in the brain, and that worldview is generated in your own brain. And when it's generated in your own brain, you're now going to use words to describe it, and the words evolve. It's not that the words generate the experience. It's the experience that generated the words. Now, if things happen in your own brain through doing these meditative practices, is it religious or not? It's a religious worldview. That's why it is religious. Because what is altered is a false worldview. So that's where the danger is. So you can't, no one can say, mindfulness, Eastern meditation, you can use Christian mantra, and it's not religious. I'm just doing breath. So, now, Dr. Britton, she reports, she's looking at people who meditate and they are having adverse effects, okay? And she reports, and these people who are doing, under her research, are young people with degrees. They're not the run-of-the-mill meditators from the East, And she reports 48% of them change in worldview when they do meditation. It changes into a pantheistic or panentheistic worldview, which is Eastern. All right, so here we have JAMA, medical magazine, looked at a meta-analysis of including 3,500 participants, and the conclusion was there was only small to moderate reduction in anxiety, depression, and pain. So mindfulness has great claims, but JAMA reports it's only small. There are two psychologists who wrote a book called Buddha Pill, and they report that Oxford Mindfulness Center in 2013 tried to prove that it's mindfulness that works in MBCT. MBCT is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. All right, so what they did was, there was a group doing MBCT, and there was a group only doing cognitive therapy. And they wanted to see if the depression relapse in the two groups showed that it's the MBCT, if mindfulness works, should be better, should have better results. Relapses should be lower, okay? So they did the experiment, and it was identical. The relapse rates were identical, which means that it is probably the CT that works, cognitive therapy that works, and not the MB, okay? So that was 2013. So they couldn't prove it because the rates were close to each other, 50%. But 4 years before that, the National Institute of Healthcare and Excellence had said MBCT has been recommended as one of the best psychological interventions to prevent recurring depression when drugs fail. A recommendation which is the authors of Buddha Pill said, a recommendation that now seemed premature 4 years earlier. Here are some hyped up reporting, right? BBC in relation to this experiment, a scientific experiment, where mindfulness is set in contrast to complex analytical training, increasing complex over 3 days. Now, the complex analytical training was to train them to deal with difficult situations. And there was mindfulness at one end, and the results were that cortisol, okay, here's what happened. Mindfulness reported less stress due to more perceived control, judging from a questionnaire. So when the folks doing mindfulness were asked, they said, oh, we feel better in control. Now, what happened in the experiment was, these folks, both mindfulness and the ones doing analytical training, they were put under stress, put under the similar stress. They were asked, for example, to count backwards from 100 in leaps of 3. And as they were counting backwards, they were asked difficult questions. So the stress levels were pushed up. All right? Now, were the mindfulness people able to control their stress? They weren't, because the cortisol was higher in the mindfulness group than the group under complex analytical training. Okay? So the mindfulness group was more stressed by the stress stimulus. Okay? But BBC reported that the mindfulness group reported less stress because, they did not say that, they reported less stress, but it was because of perceived. When you do meditation, you kind of expect to be less stressful, but your cortisol, when stressed, was actually higher, measurably higher. So mindfulness did not keep them calm. Okay? It was complex analytical training that kept them calm. All right. The other one was a $4 million project, 60 people, 3 months, 6 hours a day meditation in a resort. And the rest in the control group were just leading a regular life in their homes, right? And they were measuring this hormone called telomerase. And telomerase will be high in people who are less stressed. And of course, the people up in the resort doing the telomerase was high. But the research data on that showed that if you did more meditation, your telomerase didn't go up with it. Or you did less, telomerase didn't go down with it. Okay? And the same thing with cortisol. Right? You did more meditation, cortisol, your stress hormone, didn't go up, and less, it didn't go down. In other words, what caused a higher telomeres was that these people were enjoying a beautiful environment in the hills, doing meditation, but it wasn't meditation that gave them that higher hormonal level. It was the fact that they were up there. Okay? So these authors of Buddha Pill wanted to do their own meta-analysis. They took 4,000 articles and ended up with 30 that looked reliable, but none of them were good enough to show that transformation occurs. In other words, people become better people through meditation. Right? There are no scientific research of any reliability to prove that. Now, Mind and Life Institute. There is an institute headed by the Dalai Lama with strings of PhDs and researchers, and John Kabat-Zinn is one of them as a founding steward to use science to validate Buddhist meditation. So they're pushing this stuff out. They are pushing money into it, 240 projects, to push Buddhist meditation out there. This is a chart from a doctor, Willoughby, Britain, and she is very concerned about adverse effects. 47% have delusional and irrational and paranormal beliefs. There's fear and anxiety in 82%. There's depression. There's a whole list of adverse effects. You can Google her, Dr. Willoughby, Britain. And one of her colleagues said, many of the experiences reported by practitioners in our study resembles in varying degrees phenomena described in the vast literature of schizophrenia, psychosis, and so forth. And a lot of these symptoms show up 1 to 6 months later, 1 to 3 years later, and even later. When asked why isn't these negative adverse effects published, reported widely, she said, mindfulness is a multi-billion-dollar industry. One of the teachers I interviewed for my research actually said, this isn't good advertising. Now, Nicholas Van Damme and 14 others, including Willoughby, Britain, had put together jointly a paper of their concerns. And first of all, they said, well, mindfulness is oversold, it's hyperbole. For financial gain, it's a 1.1, and now it's probably a 1.2, $1.3 billion industry in the US alone. And so they put together a paper, and these are a summary of their concerns. Various possible meanings of mindfulness have to be clarified. Okay, in other words, if your doctor should say, oh, go do mindfulness with that therapist, that mindfulness may be very different from another mindfulness. The definitions are not clear. There are many variations. Additional discipline is essentially needed in light of recent growing troublesome meta-analytical evidence that, like some other glitzy popular topics of psychological and neural investigations, past mindfulness research has succumbed to this questionable practice, glitz and hype. Research on the nature and scope of potential adverse effects should receive considerable further attention. And they want governmental funding due to public's rapid increased involvement in practicing mindfulness. All right? There's the research, and then it's hyped up, and it's sent out, and the clinics begin to implement it. What they want is governmental control. Findings from contemplative neuroscience about mental processes and brain mechanisms of mindfulness practices must be reported with all due modesty, not hyped up. Their importation into protocols for future clinical practice must await proper vetting. So they actually called their paper Mindfulness, Mind the Hype. All right, all that information that you heard tonight is on my website. You can dig into it. My talks, longer talks are on the website. So So tell your friends and dig into it. So thank you very much. I hope it was useful. All right. Now tomorrow night, I'm going into the spiritual aspects of it. What the Bible says, right? What the East believes, what the Bible says. I'm going to contrast the East with the Bible so that you can see, and this is big, mindfulness is non-religious. It's actually the most dangerous. Because it's non-religious, it's going into school systems and medical systems. A doctor in Australia, in the middle of the desert, Ayers Rock, called me and said, "Can I have your material?" I said, "Why?" In the middle of a desert, and this is going back 4 years ago. And he said, "Well, they're bringing it into my school for my children." And then I thought to myself, now I know why, because it's systemic. The moment mindfulness hits the education system of Australia, it goes to Sydney as fast as it goes to Ayers Rock, because it's systemic. Right. And mindfulness is so well accepted now, there is a book published by 2 medical doctors, Loma Linda Health. The name of the book is called The Alzheimer Solution. The cover actually has Loma Linda's name on it. But it's a thick book, sells very well, very popular. My friends are giving it out. But within it are 8 pages of Eastern meditation, yoga, and mindfulness. So it's well accepted in the medical community out there. Kaiser Hospital sent out a newsletter to all its patients recommending it. Right? It is well accepted within Mayo Clinic's book of alternative medicine. Right? I was in Netherlands speaking, and a teacher in training said he had to learn mindfulness as part of his course. Singapore Ministry of Education is asking its teachers, what do you think of not teachers, but school counselors, what do you think of mindfulness? So it's coming. But it's got a history, it's got a lineage, it's got mystical stuff. It does the same thing to your brain as anything else. Of course, when you teach it to students, they're doing it for a minute or 2. But a minute or 2 can grow to a lot of time. And when they get in trouble, they will go that way. Right? So it's the leading edge. It's the soft cell. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And God bless you all. Thank you.